We can go back to Azure Land for a little bit if you want.
Let's go back to this one because this one intrigues me and I hadn't seen this one yet. Deploy Bastion?
Yes. So we've talked about Bastion in the past. I think one of the friction points with a lot of Azure SKUs is pricing. Like, how do you get hands-on with these things with like minimal experience? Like, what's the right way for you to get in and not spend the absolute most money possible up front? And some services like Bastion can do that. They can run away from you a little bit. Like, you've got a bunch of different things going on there. So one of the new things that happened with Bastion is they recently announced a new developer SKU that's available. So it's out in preview, and preview comes with restrictions. So it's only in a couple end user acceptance regions that are out there: North Central US, West Central US, West Europe, and North Europe, to kind of go ahead and get started with it. But I didn't see pricing published with it, but it's called out in the the pricing page on like Azure.com hasn't been updated with the new SKU yet, but all the docs are out there on Microsoft Docs. So TBD what the cost is, but it's going to be lower cost than anything else that's out there for Bastion today. So it's a dev SKU. It's missing a couple things, particularly like scaling. Like, you're not going to have any kind of scale out operations in there. You're not going to have any kind of advanced security features, anything like that. You absolutely are still going to need, Bastions for accessing your virtual machines in a VNet. So you still need VNets and virtual machines and the right roles and the right ports and protocols, and just all those kinds of things set up and ready and ready to go for you. So I think the big differences with the developer SKU, and there's some really interesting differences in here. So like the developer SKU can't RDP to a Linux machine, but then again, neither can the basic SKU of Bastion, which honestly, I never realized this, and explains a whole lot about the last couple of times I've deployed Bastion and have not been able to RDP to my Linux host. Like, that makes a whole lot of sense now, and it's never told me that in the portal. It will not do SSH again, or does the basic SKU. There's no customization around things like ports, so customizing inbound ports, anything like that. Funny enough, from an authentication side, like we should talk in the future about how Microsoft has been doing a bunch of messaging around to like the future of NTLM versus Kerberos and things like that. But even though you can only connect to Windows hosts, you can't do any type of Kerb auth to that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You also don't have the ability to do some of like the advanced security controls, like disabling copy paste, anything like that along the way. And then I think I called it out, but no scaling either. You can't also connect to VMs that are across peered VNets. So you can do that with both the basic and standard SKUs. So like I said, TBD to see where pricing falls for this one. But in general, like, I really do like to see these kinds of things come up, because the less friction and less cost you put in place of getting hands-on with these types of services, ultimately the broader deployment you can kind of drive downstream. I think it is a really nice like carrot to hang out there and get customers comfortable with it, and say they just get comfortable with it through the portal or whatever, and then they're ready to move on to PowerShell for deployment or ARM templates, things like that, because it's just a SKU of Bastion. It's not like a whole net new resource provider or anything like that. Like, it's kind of immaterial and trivial to go ahead and do things like move from the portal to a deployment script using PowerShell or the CLI, Bicep, ARM template, any kinds of those things. Interesting enough, you can also upgrade from the developer SKU to the basic or standard tiers. So that's very nice to see as well. Like you can get started with it. Maybe you find there's some friction or limitation there. And now that you're comfortable with the service, you just want to go ahead and upgrade and get yourself to where you need to be. But it's really just Bastion with a lower cost and a lower set of features that are associated with, like I said, like all the other prerequisites, they all stay the same. Like need to make sure you have enough address space, need to make sure you've got a VNet with a subnet with enough address space for that Bastion host. You got to be using standard ports, standard protocols, all those kinds of things.
Yes, I like this one as well because I think you talk about getting familiar with it, but I also see this as a way for you to better secure your infrastructure. It helps maybe Microsoft from a security standpoint. Because if you ever want to have some fun, turn on a VM you don't care about, you're too cheap or you don't want to deploy Bastion, so you just leave port 3389 open to the internet and don't bother like limiting it to just your IP address or something, and watch how long it takes for that server to start getting hammered with people trying to log into it remotely. It's incredible. So by turning on something like Bastion 2, you reduce that risk, make it a little bit more secure from that remote access standpoint. And a lot of these servers you're RDPing into tend to be kind of in line with the developer SKU. They tend to be developers that need to RDP into a server to deploy something, to set something up. So having a lower cost SKU to just get Bastion going and have some additional security around that remote access to VMs for your developers is going to be a nice option because Bastion does add up quickly. It's one of those services that you look at the pricing and you don't think it's a big deal, right? It's 19 cents per hour for the basic, 29 cents for standard. But then you start reading all the fine print that it is billed hourly from the moment it's deployed until the resource is deleted. So if you're turning this on for unlimited access to your VM, it's 19 cents an hour per hour every day. You're paying $4.50 a day times 30-ish days. It adds up to $135 a month or so for Bastion, unless you're actually going in and creating it and deleting it every time you need to access a server.
Yeah, I want to see where the pricing lands for this one, because even the developer SKU, at least from the documentation side, is still going to be priced at that per hour pricing. So, if it comes in at 15 cents versus 19 cents, I don't think that's a material thing that's going to move the needle. We'll see how low it can go, given it doesn't have any needs for auto scale or anything like that.
Yeah, if I was to guess, even looking at like standard basic, it's a 10 cents per hour. If they could get it down to like 9 or 10 cents per hour, kind of half the cost, or literally move it down, I would love to see that, where it's in the ballpark of like $60, $65 per month. So
yeah, I wonder if I go deploy one and just crank it up. Like, I see if it shows up in cost management or something. Who knows if the meters are rolled out yet? We'll see.
Yeah. So I like that one. I'm going to maybe go turn that on too, because I have used standard. I've used that quite a bit for different VMs that I deploy.
I use Bastion in a bunch of places, and I feel like every time I use it, like I'm compelled to tear it down because of the price, because lots of the things I'm doing are dev test scenarios. So I get that automation's there, but realistically, like if I'm doing something to play around for a couple weeks, like it's way easier for me to just keep it on and just pay the cost of it, and it would be way nicer if that cost was less.
Yeah, you do better than me. I'm even cheaper. I just don't deploy it, and I go modify my NSG to only allow RDP access from my IP address.
Well, there are places that I have to deploy it. I'm compelled by policy.
You must. Fair enough.